Hi, everybody. Hi, Stacy. Nice to see you here. Hey, Steve. And Dolores says, good evening, everyone. Carmen says, hi, all. Waiting for Hulk. Steve Wolfbrand says, well, he is certainly punctual. Stacy says, hello, peoples, again. And Dolores says, hello, everyone, from YouTube. Steve Wolfbrand says, hello. And Kay says, hi, everybody. Glad to see you. I'm glad to see you, too. Please share. My main topic for tonight is going to be 2 strategies for NEMA. That will take up most of the show, but I'm going to quickly move through also 3 posts as well to continue some things we've been discussing over the last few days. So I'm going to share the screen and pull up one of the infrastructure pieces, Infrastructure Summer from the American Prospect. Bipartisan bill boosts corporate giants. This is by Dave Dayen. It was done on August 11th. Seems to me I already went over this, didn't I? I think I did. This is the one where he makes the point he points out how much money was invested in the bipartisan infrastructure bill in making private sector interests happy, basically creating openings for them to funnel into the coffers of incumbent telecom companies that for decades have resisted spending much money on rural and low-income deployment. There's a $65 billion investment in broadband. And the question is how much of that is going to roll into the private sector coffers without improving any rural broadband at all. The initial Biden proposal in the American Jobs Plan gave $100 billion to broadband. That would have structurally reshaped the whole market. But this is not going to do that, especially since a lot of it is going to be siphoned off to the telecom giants. Dave points out that smaller nonprofits, electrical co-ops, and muni broadband operations do not get priority. The new language pointedly states that, quote, the program does not favor particular companies or providers, unquote. And the bill confirms that on page 2058. Even worse, the bill doesn't nullify any state laws that restrict that actually restrict cities doing broadband. As I wrote in my book, monopolized the Connect America Fund, and the Federal Communications Commission provided at least $4.6 billion in subsidies for broadband deployment between 2015 and 2020. Yet this had little effect on expansion. This act, the IIJA, grants 10 times that. However, monopoly telecoms have been skilled at picking and choosing neighborhoods to build out, only capturing the more profitable pockets. A few more points are made, but the basic point of this again, is that the bipartisan people were essentially corporate people that got their cut of the Biden agenda in this particular bill. Probably the corporates are going to line up for some of the potentially $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill which is now in the offing as well. But they got a much larger percentage of this $1.2 trillion bill. I don't think anybody can say exactly what it is now, but looks like it's shaping up to be almost 50% of it. So the problem, Dave says, is something that all of the groups that cheered the selection of various anti-monopoly appointments must now wrestle with. The Biden administration has been willing to bare teeth against corporate power with personnel, but not with its legislative policy. The broadband provisions stuck on page 2058 might not be as sexy as slogans about breaking up Google and Facebook, but they're far more important to the question of whether large corporations will continue to dominate our economy and our lives. Now, you'll remember that it was Dave Dayen who pointed up way back in 2020 at the time of the CARES Act that the $4.6 trillion that was set aside for businesses would be multiplied through the Federal Reserve into a $4.6 trillion money cannon to back corporations that did not need that backing, and which instead just used the backing of the money cannon in order to sell stocks, make money on their stocks. The reason why they could is because everybody knew the $4.6 trillion cannon existed, so they knew these companies were going to fail, so that drove up the value of their assets, of their stocks. And they could, of course, engage in buybacks of stocks too, and made profits after the value of those stocks went up. And the whole thing was a mess and led to the further accretion of corporate wealth and power in the United States. So this is another example of a sellout to the corporates. There will be something in here for people and for the economy in general, but probably only half of the $2.2 trillion that is getting allocated. So I wanted to start out on that note. Handle it quickly. There's a later piece from the American Prospect, though, also in the Infrastructure Summer Series. The question is asked today by Alexander Salmon. Will Biden's agenda survive the Senate Finance Committee? It's a picture of Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, who's the chair of the Senate. With the $550 billion bipartisan infrastructure package through the Senate, the chamber began work this week on a much bigger, more ambitious package, a $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill teed up by the 2022 budget resolution, which the Senate wrapped early Wednesday. According to recent reports coming out of the House, the former won't be moving any closer to Joe Biden's desk until the latter is similarly passed. We discussed that last night. In theory, negotiations could be relatively straightforward, given that each bill depends on the other's survival. Anything that could plausibly be called the Biden agenda is coming on track 2 of the two-track approach. The bang shot strategy that is supposedly going to bring intransigent Democratic senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin and several deficit-conscious House Democrats on board to push through a reconciliation package with only Democrat votes, but a lot can happen as the different pieces of the budget resolution pass through various committees. While much has been made of Bernie Sanders' position atop the Senate Budget Committee, which designated the $3.5 trillion top line, the committee that will have unique outside influence on the final outcome is the Senate Finance Committee. It's not exactly the friendliest roster for sweeping social spending and tax increases. Committee Republicans are certain to be a chorus of unified opposition. It's 14 Democrats, outside of recent addition Elizabeth Warren and holdover Sherry Brown, are among the most conservative members of the party, including Tom Carper of Delaware, who, however, we have to add, is most probably in the president's pocket. Then there's Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, who has a tough race coming up in 2022. And Mark Warner of Virginia, who never met a business deal he didn't like. It's chaired by Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, who has found himself in the national news more than usual lately. More on that shortly, says Dave. Here's some of the social spending the Finance Committee is tasked with covering. Paid family and medical leave. Obamacare subsidy extension, filling the Medicaid coverage gap, expanding Medicare to include dental, vision, and hearing benefits, and potentially lowering the eligibility age. Home and community-based care services under Medicaid, also addressing healthcare provider shortages, particularly in graduate medical education, child tax credit, earned income tax credit, child and dependent care tax credit extension, long-term care for seniors and persons with disabilities, tax incentives for clean energy in manufacturing and transportation, labor protections under the PRO Act, a sweeping health equity commitment, that is maternal, behavioral, and racial justice health investments, housing incentives, and any other investments within the jurisdiction of the committee, such as more environmental spending that was slimmed from the bipartisan deal. So according to the official guidance, the package entrusts the Finance Committee with, quote, $1.8 trillion in investments for working families, the elderly, and the environment, unquote. Just over 50% of the total spending in what is Biden's signature legislation. Just over 50%, that's more than the rest of the committees involved combined. That's just for the Finance Committee. But perhaps even more important than the new spending, Wyden and his colleagues will be in a position to shape other packages' spending offsets, nearly all of which also find themselves under the remit of the Finance Committee. That's the authority of the Finance Committee. All the spending the committee comes up with on its own must be offset, and an undefined but likely substantial portion of every other committee's work too. Biden has been adamant that all new spending be, quote, paid for, unquote. What an idiot, right? Of course, that's what reconciliation calls for, though, to be fair. Reconciliation bills are supposed to be deficit neutral, though the reconciliation instructions indicate that some of it can be covered by long-term economic growth. And the parliamentarian be willing, right? Because we don't know whether Biden is going to kowtow to the parliamentarian again. It's unlikely that Manchin and Sinema will go for too much of that, however, so the Finance Committee will unquestionably be responsible for finding multiple trillions of dollars in taxes and savings. Moreover, because this is a reconciliation bill, it cannot be like its bipartisan step-sibling, where the pay-fors were never really produced. The Congressional Budget Office scored it hundreds of billions of dollars deficient. So these centrists get to put a bill which can have hundreds of billions of dollars of deficit in it in a $1.2 trillion bill, but the remainder of the Democratic Party, the heavy majority, gets to craft a bill that has to be deficit neutral, right? And Republican and Democratic senators alike shrugged their shoulders and pushed it through regardless. That is the bipartisan bill. In a reconciliation package, where to be eligible, everything has to directly impact the budget by raising revenue or adding to the deficit. Those pay-fors actually have to be firm and producible as a rule, not simply hand-waved away. According to the plan, those offsets will come from corporate and international tax reform, increased taxes on high-income individuals, branded as tax fairness, quote-unquote, closure of the carried interest loophole. That's a loophole which particularly benefited hedge funders, by the way. Beefed up IRS tax enforcement, healthcare savings in the form of prescription drug pricing reform, and a carbon polluter import fee. Working against those offsets is a substantial tax cut for rich people. The repeal of the cap on the state and local tax deduction, which the Democrats are insisting on as a historic tax cut for Americans. That's for the Democrats. Suburban constituency, a substantial tax cut for rich people. The repeal of the cap on the state and local tax deduction, which was placed by the Trump administration at $10,000. Now the Democrats want to get rid of that to benefit of the rich. This bill will literally have to do it all. To be sure, any proposal this critical will make room for substantial input from every Senate Democrat, since all of them need to buy in, as well as the White House. But details matter, and the Finance Committee will be responsible for a staggering number of them. There's a reasonable concern that so many moderate Democrats there will whittle the bill down drastically before it gets anywhere near passage. Where might the trouble begin? Well, Robert Menendez, a senior committee member and one of the leading war hawks on Cuba, is likely to be the lead antagonist to prescription drug pricing reform. Given his position as the senior senator from New Jersey, a hub for the drug industry. Carper and Hassan, of course, were two of the infamous Democrats who intervened to prevent the $15 minimum wage from getting into the American Rescue Plan. Warner is one of the only Democratic holdouts on the PRO Act. All are on the committee and could bristle at any number of those aforementioned tax increases or social welfare program. But Warner also sits on the Budget Committee and in theory already extracted his cuts to the program during the round of deliberations that led the initial Sanders-introduced budget resolution to drop from $6 trillion to the $3.5 trillion we're currently talking about. Rather, it's the pay-fors that look like the biggest challenge, and Finance Chair Wyden, one of the committee's relatively progressive members, could pose a surprising obstacle to the process. In the bipartisan infrastructure package, again not paid for, the only real industry that was facing down new taxes was the cryptocurrency industry. Crypto is not, it should be said, a major lobbying force in Washington, but when the industry and famous investors like Twitter founder Jack Dorsey pushed back on the proposed tightening of reporting standards, which would have enabled taxation of groups like Bitcoin brokers and miners and raised an estimated $28 billion, Wyden teamed up with Republicans on an amendment that would undercut the existing language and exempt cryptocurrency miners from tax reporting. Has Wyden gone crazy? The maneuver was surprising for many. Wyden has been an advocate for higher taxes on the wealthy and vocal on environmental issues as well. Given crypto's well-known energy consumption, any chance to rein in the sector would have been expected to be a positive for a senator representing a state like Oregon. Instead, he lashed out against it, and by Monday, a compromise has been proposed that was celebrated by lobbyists, senators, including Republicans Pat Toomey and Cynthia Lummis, and even Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen alike as a positive step. The industries and interest groups targeted to pay for the $3.5 trillion spending package are much more organized, powerful, and fearsome than the Winklevoss twins and their crypto mining cohorts. In many cases, crypto is the smallest ox that needed to be gored. It does not portend good things that Wyden is now taxed with raising taxes on large corporations, major financial firms, hedge funds, and millionaires and billionaires. Collectively, these targets control an astonishing amount of money, power, and influence in Washington. Wyden bombed the dress rehearsal, and the main event has far more riding on it. There are plenty of proposals in the package that Democratic Finance Committee members are expected to fight hard for. Bob Casey's home and community-based services proposal is in there, as is Debbie Stabenow's advanced energy manufacturing tax credit. And Elizabeth Warren recently introduced a minimum corporate tax, which would hit 1,300 public companies with over $100 million in annual profits and raise $700 billion over a decade. For his part, Wyden's big tax proposal in recent years is a mark-to-market tax that would levy capital gains every year, eliminating the benefit of buy and hold, quote unquote, but adding significant complexity to the system. But so far, while Democrats in the Biden era have managed to find plenty of courage to spend big, they haven't found any courage to take on the country's biggest corporations and most monopolized industries, despite popular support. If Democrats fail at this and Biden and the moderates demand dollar-for-dollar offsets to the spending bonanza, the whole thing will screech to a halt. If they can't find the gumption to tax, their breakthroughs on embracing tax and spend policy will be dragged down, the latter by the former. Getting Republicans to agree to a bipartisan package was so real challenge begins. By the way, if they don't do it well in the $3.5 trillion bill, the progressives in the House, the majority of the caucus, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, have said that they aren't going to vote for the bill. They'll defeat it, and nor will they pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill either. So if this reconciliation bill doesn't get done right, there will be no bill. And Biden will be done, because that's really what the Republicans want. So we're at a fix on that, folks. A bit of a fix. Now let's move on to another fix. This is a piece from the LA Progressive that I've picked up in the LA Progressive. I don't think it's originally from there. It's called Larry Elder Meet India Walton. Hope you've heard of both of these characters. There's Governor Newsom. I often call him Bobo Newsom, after the old relief pitcher for the New York Yankees a long, long time ago. Anyway, California voters are about a week from receiving their ballots in the recall election involving Governor Gavin Newsom. But election day itself is a little over a month away. And most Californians don't even know what a, quote, recall, unquote, is all about. Can you imagine that? In 2003, Democratic Governor Gray Davis was recalled. He was the original gray man. And Republican actor turned politician Arnold was elected governor, even though he received less than 50% of the vote. With currently over 2-to-1 deficit in registered voters, the California Republicans saw the recall as the only way they can win a statewide office in this deep blue state. And the recall election will cost over $275 million of our taxpayer money, says the author. I'll look up who wrote this in a while. If Newsom does not get 50% plus one vote of those voters who say no to the recall, one of the 46 candidates who have declared in the recall race will become the governor. Okay, in other words, it's not enough for Newsom to win a plurality of these votes. He has to get a majority of these votes to stay in office. Interesting. This is definitely weighted towards getting rid of the governor, isn't it? Of these 46 candidates, 9 are Democrats, none of whom you have ever heard of. Still, it would be interesting to know if there are any worthwhile Democrats in the race. Because after all, it would probably be a good thing to replace Bobo. He hasn't actually been the greatest Democratic governor of California. 24 are Republicans. 2 are unknown Green Party members. Who are they? Maybe they would be the ones to vote for. Maybe they would at least be decent people. 1 is a Riverside supervisor libertarian, and 10 non-entities have stated no party preference. Jesse Ventura, where are you when we need you? Quote, including Malibu's own pink lady, Angelin, who ran in 2003. I will discuss 6 of the Republicans, one of whom would become governor for a year until next year's election, regarding which Governor Newsom has announced he will run for re-election, win or lose, in the recall. One of the prospective candidates who decided not to run was porn star Mary Carey, who also ran in 2003. I guess she's getting a little old for porn, so she decided to go into politics. Whose announced campaign slogan in 2021 would have been, quote, I laid down in 2003, but in 2021, I will be on top, unquote. Too bad she decided not to run. There would have been great comic relief. Here are the major Republican candidates. Larry Elder, a 69-year-old black talk radio personality. He has never run for or been elected to anything. And maybe I should move to California and run there. He is an extreme right-wing Republican. I could run against Larry Elder. He's an extreme right-wing Republican, an ardent supporter of Donald Trump. Here are his political positions. Talk about identification with the aggressor. He favors a 0 minimum wage. He is critical of public sector labor unions and favors charter schools. He believes that Roe v. Wade should be overturned. He has a history of making anti-LGBT remarks. He opposes gun control. He strongly supports peace. He opposes COVID-19 vaccine requirements, face mask requirements, or regular testing for California government workers. He does not believe that human activity is the cause of climate change. He wants to suspend the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and he refuses to provide the tax return information required of candidates. Well, if it's required of candidates, will they let him run if he doesn't supply it? In other words, he's the perfect right-wing Republican candidate. He currently has the support of 18% of likely voters. In other words, he could become the governor of California with 18% of likely voters. Maybe what Newsom should do is, the minute Larry Elder takes office, he should start his own recall campaign. Get it done in 3 months or something. Kevin Faulconer. He's a 50-year-old former mayor of San Diego, 2014 to 2020. Sorry. After serving on the San Diego City Council from 2006 to 2014, he claims to have fiscally conservative and socially liberal views. He initially supported Marco Rubio for president in 2016, but ultimately voted for Donald Trump. He vetoed a bill increasing the minimum wage in San Diego in 2014, but his veto was overridden. He tried to keep the Chargers in San Diego, but lost a ballot measure to pay for a new stadium. Good for San Diego. That was good for San Diego. Cities never make money on those ballot measures. He is the only recall candidate who might be able to run the state, as he actually has had experience running something. John Cox, 66 years old. He's a businessman, attorney, developer, and perennial candidate for office when he lived in Illinois. He takes credit for the financial turnaround of a Chicago potato chip firm, but its owners sued him for financial misconduct in 1998, which led to Cox paying a $1.7 million settlement in 1999. He became a resident of Rancho Santa Fe in 2011, endorsed by Trump for governor in 2018. He reportedly contributed $4.4 million to his own campaign, but lost to Newsom by about 24%. In 2021, he has campaigned with the Kodiak Bear, branding himself, quote, the beast, unquote, who's running against, quote, the beauty, unquote. He opposes abortion and gay rights and supports a border wall. He is again self-funding. He is, quote, yesterday's news, unquote, a confirmed loser. Then there's Douglas Osee, or maybe it's Ose, I don't know. Also 66 years old. He served as a congressman from the Sacramento area from 1999 to 2005. After several losing efforts to get back into politics, he is now using his wealth from real estate investments to run for governor. He's a long shot. Kevin Kiley, a 36-year-old GOP assembly member. Kiley has declared his candidacy. He has written a book on the recall and is endorsed by Lead, the recall organizer, whose name is Orrin Heatley. Maybe it's Heatley, I can't tell. He represents an area north and east of San Francisco and says he has supported then Ohio Governor John Kasich in the 2016 election, the same year he was elected to the Assembly. He's another long shot in the race to get future name recognition. Then there's Caitlyn Jenner, now 71. She has 6 children with 3 wives, but came out as trans in April 2015, and now wants to be the first female governor of California. For the past month or so, she has been competing in the Australian program Big Brother. So her campaign has not been seen as a serious one, but she does have the name recognition. She's probably the only candidate for governor who's killed someone as a result of a rear-ender automobile accident in Malibu, which resulted in the car she hit being propelled into a head-on collision on Pacific Coast Highway. She was not charged. She has likely 3% of likely voters supporting her. Now, the saga of India Walton. Buffalo, New York is a Rust Belt city adjoining Canada on the opposite side of the state from New York City. Four-term mayor Byron Brown, actually black mayor Byron Brown, ran for re-election in June 2021 in the Democratic Party and amazingly lost his bid for re-election to unknown, quote, Democratic Socialist, unquote, India Walton of the GOP. Did not even run a candidate in this heavily Democratic city. Democrats outnumber Republicans 7-1. India Walton is a 38-year-old black woman who grew up in the projects of Buffalo, had a baby at age 14, dropped out of high school, but later got a GED diploma about the same time as she gave birth to twin boys. She went on to graduate from a 2-year community college, became a school nurse, but quit to become a, quote, community activist. She won the primary with the vote of a little over 7% of the registered voters in Buffalo. Who is India? She has no government experience of any kind and is a total blank slate. The local newspapers have dug into her background and discovered she was convicted of receiving an excessive amount of food stamps and paid a fine, had some back taxes problems, was stopped for driving with a suspended license, resulting in a penalty, was convicted of harassing someone whom she claimed was bullying her, and lived with a convicted drug dealer whom their landlord claimed was dealing drugs out of their rental apartment. Now, all these facts may be true from my point of view, but they reek of a smear against India Walton, just like just a series of facts, that you can put together, and seem very negative, but don't really tell the story or give the realities of our experience. That as may be, India Walton denied this, claiming that her opponents were weaponizing my experiences against me, unquote. That could be the truth. Mayor Brown has announced he will wage a write-in campaign to be re-elected mayor in November general election with the slogan, quote, "Write down Byron Brown," unquote. So Buffalo Republicans, like rabid Trumpster and developer Carl Palladino, have nowhere to go. And despite his past racist comments, Palladino is rallying Buffalo business leaders to endorse Mayor Brown, urging Brown to destroy the, quote, communist, unquote, Walton. Brown wants nothing to do with Palladino. The Erie County Democratic Party has begun to distance itself from its initial support of Walton, isolating her and her campaign. The leading local newspaper, the Buffalo News, which used to be the Buffalo Evening News, has opined that the mayoralty, quote, is not an entry-level job, unquote, and allowing an, quote, an experienced and self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist, unquote, to become mayor would be, quote, irresponsible, unquote. Isn't the issue right now whether she'll be a better mayor than Byron Brown? I mean, Byron Brown was mayor for how many years? 7 or 8 years? And he lost in a primary to an unknown? What's that about? Must be that the people didn't particularly care for Byron Brown. Anyway, the Buffalo City Council is also exploring a strategy of eliminating the mayoralty altogether, having Buffalo run by a city manager appointed by the council. Wonderful. So change the rules in midstream so the Democratic Socialists can't get into office, right? Anyway, another issue has developed. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has announced he will be resigning later in August, and Democratic Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, a Buffalo resident, will become governor. What relationship would Governor Hochul have with Mayor Walton if both of them assume office? Will Buffalo continue to get the funds that Governor Cuomo has showered on Buffalo over the past decade to help the city emerge from its past status as a prime example of a, quote, Rust Belt, unquote, city? Is California like a Buffalo? By September 15th, we should know if Governor Newsom will remain in office. It all depends on whether his party can motivate California Democrats and independents to check the no box on the ballot and mail it back or drop it off before September 14th or go to the polls on that date and do the same. It seems like a simple task, but many Californians are now on vacation or are getting their children ready for school in this COVID-19 era and have other things to worry about. However, should Newsom lose and a GOP governor take office, and should 88-year-old Senator Dianne Feinstein die, resign, or retire from office over the next year, the new Republican governor could appoint a Republican senator to take her place, turning the Senate into a 51-49 Republican majority and returning, quote, Moscow Mitch McConnell to the position of Senate Majority Leader. Might happen just in time to block the reconciliation bill, guys, right? God. Anyway, another development is that the California Constitution states that an election to choose a successor to a recalled governor must be held, quote, if appropriate, unquote. However, the Constitution already provides that, quote, lieutenant governor shall become governor when a vacancy occurs in the office of governor. The lieutenant governor is a Democrat. Her name is Eleni Koulakis, who was close to Governor Newsom. In 2003, the lieutenant governor, Cruz Bustamante, was himself a candidate to replace Governor Gray Davis and lost to Schwarzenegger. So the issue did not come up. It is certain that Newsom would turn to the courts, to determine if he can be replaced by a member of the Republican clown show who's running against him in the recall election. This could keep Newsom in office well into next year, a year in which he will be running for re-election anyway. The answer in both California and Buffalo is simple: vote. This was written by Ted Vail, who I assume is a Californian. From the tone of this, he is not a very lefty Californian, given his treatment of India Walton, in Buffalo. So you can see why this is important, because the potential exists for the Democrats to lose control of the Senate, or I should say for the GOP to regain control of the Senate, which would make things even worse than they are now, though maybe not much worse given the way some of these Democrats act. However, this also relates to another question, or to another point. That is, if it were possible for the left to quickly mobilize in California very quickly mobilize, because this is coming soon. Very, very soon. A little over a month away. If they could somehow mobilize in that month, and they could push in a Green Party candidate, guess what? Guess what? They would be in a position to have a governor who would be willing to sign a state-based single-payer bill. All of a sudden, things might get brighter for a single-payer-based bill. Or, alternatively, if Bobo wants to stay in as governor, maybe, just maybe, he could get on there and he could run and he could say to people, look, I know that I ran on Medicare for all during my last election, and I know I haven't really delivered on it, but I swear on a stack of Bibles, ironclad oath this time, that if you defeat these other non-entity candidates for governor, and if you give me 50 plus 1% of this recall vote, that I will absolutely see to it that there is a single-payer universal health care program passed in Washington, California during the next year. That could happen. He's got to get people excited. What can he do to get people excited? He could make an ironclad promise. Folks, cross my heart and hope to die. He could do that. He could do that. He could say, look, I'll even get my cousin. Is she a cousin or aunt twice removed? I don't know. I'll even get my cousin Nancy Pelosi to come here and campaign for single payer in California. She just said people should turn to the states anyway. So I'll get her to come here and campaign for me and throw her considerable weight into the election. And we swear, cross our hearts and hope to die, California will have single payer by hook or by crook. By this year. And if I break my word, you can vote me out. You can vote me out in the next general election for governor. It's only a year. If I break my word, then you can punish me quick. There are all kinds of things he could say. What I'm saying is, he could probably get people excited if he really ran on Medicare for all this time and did the various ritual things. I can't even do it. Did the various ritual things you have to do to really convince people that this time I'm not lying. I'm doing it.
I never saw you crush yourself.
Yeah. Did I do it right?
I guess.
I don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, there it is. I'm sure Bobo knows how to do it right. If he can do that, maybe he can get enough people out so that he can beat Larry Elder's 18%. And not have California turned over to the tender mercies of someone who believes in a zero minimum wage, the breaking of labor unions, founding of all kinds of other charter schools, who believes Roe v. Wade should be overturned, has a history of making LGBT remarks, opposes gun control, strongly supports the police. I mean, how can you get any worse than Larry Elder? That should motivate you to get out there to the polls. even if Bobo Newsom hasn't been the best governor, but go ahead, Bobo. Make them want you. Single payer all the way. So, folks, Steve Wilbrand says Bobo means stupid in Spanish. I'm sorry. I had no idea. Forgive me. I'll tell you, for my money, he would have saved himself a lot of grief if he had pushed through a single payer bill for California. There would have been no recall then. No recall at all. And a lot fewer people in California would have died as well. Anyway, now we finally get to the main topic of the evening, which is the strategy. 2 strategies for NEMA. What is NEMA? National Improved Medicare for All. NEMA. That's an acronym that came our way courtesy of the Physicians for a National Health Program. It was applied to John Conyers' final bill, H.R. 676, before he retired, and then afterwards to Keith Ellison's version of H.R. 676, and then to H.R. 1384, Pramila Jayapal's first bill, and now to H.R. 1976. His latest bill, or her latest bill, I should say, her latest bill is also known as National Improved Medicare for All, because it is enhanced Medicare for all, way beyond the first version of H.R. 676, which was introduced by John Conyers Jr. in 2004, if I recall correctly. And if I don't, it was 2005 or 2003, or it was way back then. Bonnie's laughing. Anyway, there are warring groups right now, both in back, of NEMA. One of those groups is, well, it's actually 2 groups. It's called the Red Berets, and the second of those 2 groups is Whole Washington. And the other group that's warring with the combination of Red Berets and Whole Washington shall go unnamed here tonight. I'm not even going to name them, who they are. I'll keep them abstract for the sake of comity within the progressive ranks. Anyway, volunteers for that particular group have been coming into threads launched by Whole Washington, and the Red Berets now for, well, since about the end of May. So what of it? Well, it's roughly 2 months. I said today it was 2.5 months. I think I aired there. I think it's probably only close to 2 months. So I exaggerated a bit. I'm sorry for exaggerating a bit. They've been coming into the threads of these other groups, and they've been advocating for a NEMA-only strategy. That is, you push, you pressure, you do extraordinary actions to pressure your congresspeople and your senators to pass NEMA ASAP. And you have the strategy being followed by the Red Berets and Whole Washington. And that strategy is, put simply, do that. That is the first strategy. but also pressure your state level legislators to pass single payer universal health care in their states. That's the second strategy. In other words, the first strategy is do the one thing. The second strategy is do both things at once, simultaneously, so that if your pathway in one area is blocked, you can make progress in the other area. The second strategy goes by the name of the fight on all fronts strategy. So for short, I'll say there's the direct NEMA strategy, and there's the fight on all fronts strategy. Those are two different strategies. When the fight got started, the group that shall go unnamed went into the threads of the Fight on All Fronts group and started saying, if you're fighting on all fronts, you're making a big mistake, because if you should pass state-based single payer, it will never work, because states are not the currency issuer, and therefore their state-based plans will be too expensive and will not be fiscally sustainable for the states. Washington, of course, is the state-based group in Washington that has put forth first a bill and most recently an initiative to be passed by the people in Washington to make single-payer universal health care law, in Washington. So, first they argued that, and they largely put in variations of that for about a month. There was even a podcast where there were two MMT economists who both pointed out the difficulties and perhaps the folly of doing this at the state-based level because of the difficulties of fiscal sustainability at the state level. The arguments went on. They were fierce. As time went on, the insistence on the idea that the currency, the insistence on the idea that the currency sovereign point was going to be enough to win the argument as to which of the two strategies was the right one, that seemed to fade from prominence. It became apparent, evidently, to people that that point was fully understood by Red Berets in whole Washington, and Red Berets in whole Washington were reading MMT and learning MMT, and getting to know it. But still, not many people believed that that was enough to mark the whole Washington effort as doomed to failure due to fiscal sustainability. So then the group that will go unnamed, or to be exact, the volunteers from that group who came into the RB Whole Washington threads on Twitter then started pointing out all of the difficulties that might create, in turn, fiscal sustainability problems, or that might be other factors that would cause the Washington State program to fail if it passed and were implemented in the first place. Now, there were two major arguments, two blockbuster arguments, that were used by the group that shall not be named. The first of these arguments was the race to the bottom. And the second of these arguments was that there is no path to NEMA using the state-based approach. That something similar might have gone on in Canada, but that conditions in the United States today are such that it's so different from Canada that it could never happen here in the United States. Okay. And so that argument has been simply, there exists no path to get to NEMA through the state-based single-payer strategy, that part of the dual strategy, of the fight on all fronts strategy. Now, I became aware of this in late May and early June, and I did some live streams back then. And I sided with the fight on all front strategy, and I have since that time. Stacey says, why shan't they be named? Because I've been through 2 months of fighting already. I'm happy to fight over the issues. I'm happy to fight over the strategies. I'm happy to fight over the policies. Happy to fight over the logic. Happy to fight over the fact. I don't want to get into, a shouting match about the idea that I'm trying to drag the good name of some group through the mud. I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm just trying to discuss the two strategies, to evaluate the two strategies, and to say which I think is better. So from my point of view, those were the two main arguments other than the currency sovereign argument, which I think has pretty much been disposed of now as a decisive factor anyway. Okay? So that's why I'm not going to name the group. Most of you probably know who it is anyway, but that's all right. I'm not going to drag their name through the mud. But in 2 Twitter storms, I have addressed that there isn't, I have addressed the argument that there is no path to single payer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through my arguments. Okay, again, the first one was in a tweet storm that has not been run through the Thread Reader app, okay, as yet. It came about in the context of another thread where a lady by the name of Rose Ann Rabiola Mealy, I guess it is, tweeted, I want M for A. I know the federal government can provide it when Congress says spend. Only 535 of them. There are millions of us. Let's focus on getting what we need and deserve. So in numbered tweets, I answered, by 1, agree that the FedGov can provide #NEMA when Congress says spend. But the issue is the best strategy for getting Congress to spend. The group that shall be namers, I don't want to name the group, say pushing Congress for hashtag NEMA with mass pressure is best. But the Red Berets and whole Washington say do that and push state single-payer programs the same way. Critics of RBWW somehow part of that tweet seems to have been dropped, but I'll go on to the second one. Right now, the strategy of the group with no name is blocked by Republican and but Democratic leaders. Short of general strikes, boycotts, and other hard-to-organize actions, we're looking at 8 more years or more before the group with no name strategy is feasible. But the WW strategy can deliver some successes in months. And what success is that? It's the passage of the initiative in the state of Washington and hashtag NEMA in 4 years. So I'm saying hashtag NEMA, National Improved Medicare for All, could come about in 2025 if the state-based strategy is successful. Of course, that doesn't just assume that it'll be successful in Washington. It assumes that soon after Washington, there will be many more successes. And I'll go on and talk about those. 3, the savings delivered by single payer can be viewed in terms of savings per person, with upwards of 90% of the population of any state, that is, saving money under single payer. Perhaps as much as $3,000 per person per year. Where I get that number is as follows, and this is not in the tweet, I'm adding to it. On the average, it costs more than $10,000 per person per year in the United States for healthcare these days. That's the spending. That's the actual spending. In fact, I think it's closer to $11,000 per year. So I'm saying single payer, even at the state level, and there'd be more savings at the federal level, okay, if Medicare for All passed, that the healthcare spending would fall to $7,000 per person per year. Considerable reduction. That means it is profitable for most people to live under a single-payer system, even if there is some increase in state taxes paid. Increases would probably come in the form of payroll taxes and some premiums and some copays, because single payer at the state level would not involve no premiums, no copays. Okay, there would probably be some. Anyway, going on with the 4th tweet, this money advantage doesn't begin to include advantages of single payer in reducing individual risk, actually getting health care with little money outflow at the point of service, increases in life expectancy for most any age, and choice of provider, which will be much greater under single payer than current in-network only systems. The implication of the difference is savings per person is that one should look at the more populous states to see the likely impact of the state-based aspect of the fight on all fronts strategy. I'm into tweet number 6 already. The first 10 most populous states have 55% of the population of the United States. And they will be the states that can have the greatest bargaining power with the providers and the greatest ability to organize other states to join with them to present common regional plans to HHS when they seek the waivers to get pass-throughs of federal money to help to underwrite the costs of their plan. Thus, California is capable of organizing a number of states to present a regional plan to HHS. I know this is not currently part of the whole Washington effort, number 8, but Washington is large enough to serve as a model for California to join it later, along with Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Hawaii, to form a regional plan and bargaining unit with 71 million people. Also, New York can play that role in the Northeast, consolidating Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, and Maryland, and Virginia, and even West Virginia into a comparable size grouping. Visualize this. It's not going to happen all at once, but it can happen fast. Notice New York can probably get some consolidated plan through with Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, but New Jersey and Pennsylvania in the first try. But then it's clear to me that once the citizens of Delaware, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine see that this is going to happen. Oh, I should have included the state of Maryland in that, by the way. Okay. And when those other states, including Virginia and West Virginia, see what's done and what's happened, I think there will be overwhelming pressure on their state legislators to get in on that action, to become a part of that particular plan. And even though the state legislatures of many of those places are pretty conservative, particularly West Virginia and Maine, okay, and New Hampshire, it seems to me that they're going to want to climb on. And as far as what went on in Vermont and an earlier time is concerned, people say, oh, Vermont backed off. Yeah, based on some consultant studies and particularly the employment of Jonathan Gruber, who was an Affordable Care Act consultant with a model that was optimized for the Affordable Care Act, who did consulting for Peter Shumlin. Shumlin had a number of other consultants as well. But the voice of Gruber carried the day, and Shumlin backed out of doing the single-payer program, okay, in May as a result. But that doesn't mean they won't join a program led by New York with a much greater population in it. In other words, if all those states were to get in, that would be another like 72 million people or 73 million people coming in. Now, why is that significant? Well, Vermont's got what, 700,000 people or something like that as a bargaining unit. That's nowhere near as powerful as the state of Washington alone, but it certainly is nowhere near as powerful as that whole conglomeration of Western states with the 71 million people. And New York would eventually be putting together a similar size aggregation of its people for its plan consolidating a region. So the bargaining power of such a large number of people would be very, very great when it comes to things like reducing drug costs, bargaining with the pharmaceutical companies, directly with the pharmaceutical companies, bargaining with providers in all of these areas. Much lower costs could be expected to be negotiated by these large aggregations of states. And so it would be feasible for Vermont and for New Hampshire, okay, and for Maine. The earlier cost analyses, okay, of Jonathan Gruber, which nobody should trust anyway, since he was a partisan, okay, of the ACA, those would be out the window. There would be new evaluations done. And I'm telling you, the evaluation for Vermont would be that they would save considerable money with a single-payer program. Anyway, on to tweet number 9. In the North Central area, Illinois can play the organizing role for an aggregation including Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Now, Indiana and Ohio will no doubt hold out for a while. But by this time, the success of these regional plans will, and I'll get on to number 10 in just a minute, I want to go back and I want to point out that the state of Minnesota would really want this and would press hard for it bad. And Michigan, too. And those states pushing together for Medicare for all would bring in Wisconsin also. Okay. And Iowa would simply come along. There's enough single-payer support in Iowa, right-wing state or not right now, that its legislature would be overwhelmed by the desire for single-payer and by the fact that the border states, one of its primary border states, specifically Minnesota, had adopted single payer, and they could see its operation right across the border by easily traveling to Minnesota, talking to its people. It's that North Central agglomeration is going to be quite attractive for Iowa. It would quickly join. And even though Indiana and Ohio would hold out for a while, when they see the savings, I mean, you can't argue with the Medicare plus dollar savings. Even conservative states can only argue with that for a while. Anyway, I said, by this time, the success of these regional plans will cause rising demand for hashtag NEMA in holdout states in other regions. Some of these red states, oh, by the way, with these 3 regions together, we'd be talking about 160 to 170 million people in state-based single payer. So the success of these regional plans will cause rising demand for NEMA in holdout states and other regions. Some of those red states, Texas and Florida in particular, will hold out because the politics in those states are crazy and the governments are crazy. But since the state-based path will be blocked by state politics, great demand will develop on the senators from those states to support NEMA so that people in those states can save thousands per year per person as well. If single-payer supporters from states that have it maintain their support for NEMA, which they will because they stand to gain a fiscal sustainability advantage through a federal program and a tax advantage if it is funded federally, then NEMA should come closer and closer to passing as time passes. Also, I forgot to mention a premium advantage, since NEMA is no copays, no premiums, and no deductibles. In other words, there will be plenty of incentives for people who have state-based single payer to support NEMA. 13. The above is one scenario for state-based path to NEMA. The people from the group that shall not be named say there is no such path. I say that depends on complex state-level politics and on cross-state impacts, which in turn depend on activism and an ability to change people's minds based on events that we cannot now predict. What we can say is that the way is now blocked nationally by Biden, Schumer, Pelosi, the Republicans, and the conservative Dems. while at the state level there are a number of large blue states wanting Medicare for all who are capable of organizing regional plans as described above. And just to add some two particulars to this, the outlook in Washington is looking good to get the initiative passed, which bypasses the legislature there and gets the law on the books. If that happens, okay, and if Newsom should suddenly decide that he needs to go for Medicare for all strong right now, and that if he does win, or even if he doesn't, okay, and he's running again for re-election in 2022 when the general election occurs, he's going to have to try to get people excited with state-level single payer at that time, and he's going to have to cross his heart and hope to die, and he's going to have to work to pass it at that time. And with Washington in sight, having done it and performing, California is going to come into it. Once California comes into it, that's already, between those two states, it's 48 million people. Oregon just falls into their lap. It's going to be 52 million people. Probably Arizona's going to lag a little bit. New Mexico maybe won't lag as much as Arizona. Also, Nevada is likely to fall fairly quickly. I think Colorado will fall quickly. There's a single-payer constituency in Colorado. There has been for a long time. Now, Hickenlooper is against it, of course. And so is Michael Bennet. But really, they wouldn't be passing a national bill, so they're not going to try to block it at the state level. I think single payer would happen at the state level then. If it were a matter of joining California and the others in a regional plan that was already operating successfully in a unit of 52 million people. So I think Colorado gets in fast. I think Arizona gets in fast. Arizona is purple enough. A lot of its people are going to want single payer. And the pressure to get it from that legislature and join California is going to be overwhelming. And New Mexico can fall faster than Arizona. If New Mexico and Colorado do it, will Arizona stay out? Is Nevada going to stay out? I don't think so. I think it's a continuous band of single-payer states. Now, of course, they're not going to get Idaho and Montana, okay, and Wyoming. But who cares? Smaller states with smaller numbers of people and legislators that are very conservative, very, very conservative. But on the other hand, the people of those states can pressure their senators something awful to get a national version of single payer, specifically NEMA. In other words, in the end, where state-based can't be passed because the legislature are too conservative, the people of those states who will want to have national improved Medicare for all will and can directly pressure their senators to get them NEMA. Now, I haven't considered yet what I'm going to go through now, which is the second argument against it, the second major argument against it. That one is the race to the bottom argument. I refer to the race to the bottom argument here as RTTB. WW is whole Washington, and SP is single payer. And here are the 10 tweets in that tweet storm. Whole Washington is a single payer system. Also, the race to the bottom argument is an easy one to make because we've seen it in operation both domestically and internationally since the 1950s, when some manufacturers started moving south to escape high labor costs and high taxes in northern states. As you all know, that was followed by manufacturers going to Mexico, going overseas, going to the Orient, going all over the place to escape higher labor costs and higher taxes in northern states. The race to the bottom. 2. On the other hand, there are reasons why the populations of states like New York, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Texas, Florida, California, Oregon, Washington, Georgia, North Carolina, and Nevada have grown faster than neighboring states at various times in history. To see whether businesses and or people will be victims of a race to the bottom or beneficiaries of a race to the top, RTTT, a race to the top. One has to look at a variety of advantages and disadvantages offered by a state. People criticizing a state-based strategy look at higher taxes for businesses and conclude that businesses will flee the state that has the higher taxes. But Georgia Davenport, who's operations director of Whole Washington, points out that employers, tweet 4, will not flee higher taxes when the amount they will pay under WWHT is significantly less than what most employers pay currently. But many employers pay over 15% of payroll to healthcare. The WWHT, that's the Whole Washington Health Trust, is 8.5%, with the first 15K exempted. So this is for the employers. There's an 8.5% payroll tax for the employers, but they're already paying over 15% of payroll to healthcare. That goes away. It's replaced by the 8.5%. But the first $15,000 of profit is exempted for very small businesses. So that's a factor motivating the race to the top compared to other states. I'm on tweet 5 now. Critics also note that people may flock to Washington due to single-payer increasing social services burden in Washington and other states that adopt it. However, increases in population can also mean increases in consumer demand and labor supply factors that can increase the attractiveness of a state and contribute to the race to the top. Sometimes critics mention that single-payer states may lose medical personnel to surrounding states that will pay higher fees to providers. That could be a problem, but it could also be that more and better medical professionals would be attracted to a state that through single payer reduced the paperwork burden on professionals, increasing the time they have to actually practice medicine, which is why most of them went into the healthcare industry in the first place. That was tweet number 7. Tweet number 8. In other words, the race to the bottom critics of single payer need to be specific, even to model the likelihood that race to the bottom will win out over race to the top in the single payer area. They have not done that. They just assume that RTTB will prevail rather than RTTT. And even if they do in the future model various factors, we have to remember simulation models are only as good as assumptions that go into them. So we need to see models and carefully evaluate them. People who use them to arrive at conclusions should be required to share models for evaluation or lose standing in debate. Now, why did I say that? that was obviously named the Jonathan Gruber and the Vermont case. Specifically, Gruber never made public his models. I don't even know if he made them public to Peter Shumlin. He may have. But I don't know if he exposed the assumptions. I don't know if Shumlin was competent to critique the assumptions that he made. We don't know what went on there. It was all behind the scenes. It wasn't transparent. The only thing that was transparent was at the end, oh, well, I had consulting from Jonathan Gruber, Obama's consultant on single payer, and the conclusions he showed me were that it wasn't going to work in Vermont. It wasn't fiscally sustainable in Vermont. So I pulled the plug on the program, as I had the authority to do. That's basically what we heard from Shumlin. The whole evaluation was very non-transparent. As far as I know, the model was never made public. The assumptions are not known to this day. Number 10, and by the way, the particular fiasco I'm going to talk about came about in just about the same time frame as the Jonathan Gruber thing. I think the Jonathan Gruber thing was a year or two later, but basically, number 10, I'm reminded of the Reinhardt by Rogoff fiasco in modeling, where policymakers crafted austerity policies in line with their findings, and 3 years later, it was found that they made serious calculation errors, had poor methodology, and had highly questionable assumptions. People died as a result. As you all know, austerity kills. That's an especially popular slogan with respect to the group that shall not be named. You know, austerity sucks. Austerity kills. By the way, I think I was among the first to say austerity kills, because I based my notions on a book called, I think it was called The Body Economic, that was written about 2010, 2011. Really horrific revelations of the results of collapsing policies, especially with respect to medical care, due to austerity policies. It was incredible. But anyway, people died as a result in nation after nation. They died in the millions because of austerity policies, especially if you count the numbers of people who died in Russia when they could no longer afford to have a national healthcare system that was any good there. I mean, the population of Russia went down, I don't know, maybe 30 million people during that period. It was a slaughter. Many people died in Greece due to the austerity imposed on Greece by the EU. People died in Spain. People died all over Europe from austerity policies squeezing the healthcare systems, of Europe. And by the way, one of the reasons why single payer wasn't seriously considered in 2009 here was because Obama was thinking austerity himself at the time. He had to spend big for the ARRA, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. He had to do that. But he still strove to keep that under $1 trillion. Seems quaint, right? He kept it to $800 billion because he didn't want to spend too much. And ever after that, He tried to squeeze as much money out of everything as he could. Austerity policy, austerity economics. They're killing people. Anyway, when we talk of modeling, we have to be very, very careful. And the race to the bottom versus the race to the top. There are complex dynamics in that. I outlined in this tweet storm why I think Washington may be getting into a race to the top at just the right time. And while the West Coast nations may be getting into a race to the top, and that joining them in the race to the top will soon be the East Coast nations and the North Central nations. Some of those nations are going to want their populations back that have been migrated to places like Texas. And there's no better way to do it than getting a single payer program into those states to have those states grow again, okay, and boom again. Why would they boom again? Because the states will be saving money in all kinds of direct and indirect ways as a result of the single payer program, and their economies are going to be the better for it. And there will be a race to the top in those particular states. So I hope you liked tonight's program. I will now be turning, as I usually do, to your comments. Russ Goldman, it just happens to say, The Body Economic was one of my first reads when I stumbled into MMT and into neoliberalism in 2016. It was a shocking read. Wasn't it a shocking read, Russ? It was something, wasn't it? I'll go back to the beginning. That's one of the last comments that have been made. I'm running a little over. I'm about 10:40 right now, but it's not so bad. So back to the beginning. I got to start off with Evelina, okay, at 9/11, because that's the earliest that's visible to me here in this interface. She says, I'm skeptical they'd be interested in expanding broadband in rural areas. Suburbs, yes. Evelina, I'm skeptical too. If they ever have to do something that doesn't make big profits, they just want to grab the money and run, and they don't want to do it. And so you got to make them do it. If you don't make them do it, you're creating a barbecue for the rich and for the wealthy people. That's what this first infrastructure bill, that's what it's structured to be. It was structured by corporate Democrats and the whole Republican Party in order to pay off their donors. That's what it's about. Steve Wolfbrand said, Elon Musk's space-link satellites are now online to dead spots and to rural people. Well, hopefully that will help. Evelina says, Steve Wolfbrand, really? What about the rest of the country? So he says, Evelina, we're one country removed from D.C., so we have rural, but not exactly rural. One county removed from D.C., sorry, Stacy. So we have rural, but not exactly rural compared to the rest of the country. I know. We're not very rural compared to the rest of the country either out here. In fact, it's very citified in the Leesburg area right now. The area between Reston and Leesburg going west has gotten very suburbanized, very. Steve Wolfbrand says, them as well, I suppose. I've read speed is good and cost affordable. It's still in development, but over 500K so far. I follow Musk a lot. That's a good idea, Steve, because we got to know all about that plutocrat. And Ghost Start says, Biden sending 3,000 new troops to Afghanistan. You mean we haven't lost enough troops in Afghanistan yet? He's probably sent them in to cover the withdrawal, so there won't be an embarrassing slaughter when we try to withdraw our people. Evelina says, a suburb of D.C. then, right? Yeah, we live in Ashburn, Virginia, which is a suburb. It doesn't directly border D.C. It's in what's probably called the outer ring of suburbs right now. Stacey Van Veen says it's more of a bedroom community than a suburb. The next county up in the Panhandle has already started on public broadband, so more Republican, less population. Here we're contiguous to the wealthy and densest Virginia counties, which are the richest in the country. I think you're talking about Loudoun County, aren't you? I'm in Loudoun County. And you're not too far from Fairfax County either, I don't think. I think those are the counties you're talking about, aren't you? Ghostart says, meanwhile, convoys carrying combat equipment for U.S. forces attacked in southern Iraq. Here in Ashburn, we're not only a bedroom community, we are the data centers of the world place. All the data centers in creation seem to have descended on Ashburn, Virginia. Where all the farms used to be, there are now data centers. Evelina says, interesting. Thank you, Stacy. Kostat says, meanwhile, convoys carrying combat equipment for U.S. forces attacked in southern Iraq. But did they attack in southern Iraq, or were they attacked in southern Iraq by the Shia militias? Evelina says, interesting. Thank you, Stacy. Steve says, a gutted infrastructure bill won't save Sleepy Joe or Democrats in the midterms. On Medicare for all, $15 minimum, forgiveness of student debt, Green New Deal might have saved them, but they are doomed. Gina Stiles says, hi all. And Lana says, hi, Gina. That must mean Gina is a friend of Lana's. Good. Evelina says, yeah, not him, us. And Ghost Start says, Representative Rokana says, the $3.5 trillion budget plan passed in the Senate early Wednesday morning marks the end of neoliberalism that has governed America for the last 4 decades, says the Raytheon Democrat. By the way, one of the biggest of the defense industry places is real big in this part of Loudoun County. That is Raytheon. I got Raytheon all over the place here. I wonder if Rokana comes out to visit very frequently. Anyway, he says, yeah, the end, of neoliberalism, I wouldn't be too sure. The $3.5 trillion budget plan is going to be taking a lot of hard verbal knocks from the stupidities of Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, and they're going to be trying to cut it. And the question is, will the progressives in the Progressive Caucus have the guts to say no 3.5T bill, no dice for anything. Everything goes down. Your barbecue bill of $1.2 trillion goes down, and our bill for the people goes down. It all goes down. Nobody gets nothing if we don't get ours. It's time the progressives started saying that. And Lana says, how about Rand Paul preaching against getting vaccinated? And now he see his wife invested last year in remdesivir, parent company Gilead. Gotta love this guy. By the way, there's all kinds of research evidence out there now showing that ivermectin way outperforms remdesivir. Hey, Joe, You see that Convo Couch show with Max Kaiser, a Bitcoin expert? I think you would like it, and we need your advice on it. Please take a look and advise us. I will. I saw it. I haven't had any time to watch it yet, Steve. I know Max Kaiser is a Bitcoin expert. I think Max Kaiser bought in when Bitcoin was at $3, and now Bitcoin is approaching $60,000. I don't know how much Max Kaiser bought at that point, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn that he bought in 20,000 worth. So you can multiply 20,000 by 20,000, I guess it would be. And that would be his gain. Someone could do that arithmetic easily for me. Max Kaiser is an asshole. True. But he made a pretty good guess on that one, and he was rich enough to start with that he could afford to take a flyer on the 20,000. And his feeling that it was going to boom was right, because volatile pieces of crap like that sometimes do. And when they do, volatile pieces of crap like Max Kaiser, I shouldn't say that about Max Kaiser. I don't even really know the guy. Okay. He's obviously a very intelligent guy. Stacey Herbert, his wife, is also quite intelligent as well. I think at some level they're good people, but Max is one of those genius types who could be a real asshole from time to time in his pronouncements, and who has a whole bunch of arrogance, just a whole bunch of arrogance. And Ghostart says, #Inside Trader, is there any scam that's not in play? Steve says, yeah, possibly. It was a weird show, hard to understand. I think Max had an agenda, i.e. selling Bitcoins. Yeah, he's probably trying to unload his Bitcoins at 60,000 right now. Sandy's Deck says, helloing, share. Hey, Sandy. Kay says, hi, Sandy. Alana says, Steve, he is slimy. Alana says, previous porn star. Who's a porn star? Max Kaiser? Max Kaiser was a porn star? I would find that incredible. I would find that incredible. Steve Wolfbrand says, I should have run. Oh, maybe Larry Elder was a porn star. Yeah. Maybe he's the one you're talking about. I don't know. In other words, Larry Elder is a Death Eater. Oh, God. Steve Wolfbrand says, we do have a right-wing transsexual running. Go figure. It's Callie. Steve says, is it too late to get on the ballot? I got a lot of progressive friends here. Sandy Deck says, sounds like a real gem. Ghostut says, this week, a Democrat, Arizona guy pictured with Pelosi, AOC, etc., busted for child porn. On the GOP side, guy busted for child trafficking. My God. And Steve Wolfbrand says, Larry Elder is an Oreo cookie, black on the outside and white on the inside. Well, that could be, but he's really pretty white on the outside, too. Steve Wolfbrand says, it's not looking good for Newsom. Seriously. Not looking good for Bobo. Sandy Denk says, I heard Jenna talking about her platform. I wasn't impressed. Kay says, not at all impressed with Jenna. She's nuts. She's nuts. Evelina Pont says, wouldn't it be the first trans woman, or is it trans man governor? Sorry, I get it confused. It would. She was a man, now she's a woman. Evelyn says, not first, but women governor, anyway, in my opinion. But the first woman governor of California. Steve Wolfbrand said, I suppose so, unless she changes back into a man. Well, Stacey Van Veen says, a lot of black people are a lot more conservative than the media would like you to think. Yes, maybe they're Dems, but a lot of them are religious Calvinist types, so they're stingy and about punishing everybody. They stood in the way as the main opponents to same-sex marriage in Maryland. We got it passed in spite of them. Yes, I quite agree. There are people like that. Certainly people like that. Kay says, I hope India wins. She won already. The question is, what are they going to take it away from? Well, she won in the primary, yeah. It's possible she could be beaten by a writing candidate, Caitlyn Jenner. But I hope she wins too. I think she deserves it. Insider trading in Congress includes Burr, Perdue, Loeffler, and Pelosi, etc. I'm sure there are a lot more than those go start. Stacey Van Veen says, me too. Steve Wilson says, yes, she would be the first trans woman governor unless Michelle decides to jump into the fray. You never know here. Kay says, our politics are so screwed up everywhere. Shake my head. Sandy Dick says, Dr. Rachel Levine is the first openly transgender federal official to be confirmed by the Senate Health and Human Services. And Evelina says, Steve Wolfbrandt, laugh out loud. Michelle is a woman. As a woman, I can tell. You all know Newsom is Pelosi's nephew, right? It's a big club. We're not in it. Yeah, I know. Didn't I refer to that? I said I wasn't sure whether nephew or cousin, or whatever, but whatever. They were family. And I thought he could use her to campaign for single payer in California. Since she seems to be on a turn it over to the states kick. Kay says, no, I didn't know that, Steve. Sandy Dick says, she came to my Facebook page and yelled at me for supporting Bernie and not Hillary. I told her my vote is mine and blocked her. Who yelled at you? Nancy Pelosi came on your Facebook page and she blocked you? Or was it the transgender lady who blocked you? Evelina Ponce says, I know, it's all BS, isn't it? She said, California better get its shit together or we're screwed. He says, it's probably a different show, but I don't make statements without doing much research. JS, but maybe I'll DM you sometime. But the question is, Steve, where do you do your research? I'm sure you research these things carefully, but where are your sources? Ghostart says, Burr cover-ups not in Congress, copy past Sirota. Steve Wolfbrand tells me Bobo means stupid in Spanish. Evelina says, I cannot respect that. She's open about being transgender. Doesn't get her genders mixed up. Ghostart says, fucked around finding out scorched earth policies. That's a hashtag. Stacey says, I think Bobo will do the least and do a Martha Coakley, or to be more local, an Anthony Brown. Oh, God. Steve Holmes said, I don't think Larry Elder's name got on the ballot for some mishap. I think he's during or something. It's complicated. I hope you're right, because 18% of the voters like Larry Elder out in California. Evelina says, Steve Wolfbrandt or idiot. Laugh out loud. If Larry Elder is not running, then maybe the way is open for some Green Party candidate to be running. I sure hope that it's Rodolfo Cortez Barragan who's running. He'd make a great governor of California. Steve says, Tanto, Bobo, Penteo, all the same. Evelina says, Tanto. Evelina says, in the southern cone, however, Pendeo just means young kid. Evelina says, young punk, to be more exact. Sherry Y says, damn, my connection is bad, hanging it up. Evelina says, sorry, Sherry. Sherry, try YouTube, it works better. And Evelina says, and Stacy says, why shan't they be named? I answered that before. Okay, says, I have a friend in Washington State, and he says it's happening. Sandy says, I think I know, but I am not sure. You must be sure. Stacy says, start with R and end with P. I'm sorry. I can't say. But you'll know if you look at the original of those Twitter streams. I'll tell you that. Stan corrected Evelina. Tanto is correct. You are right as usual, but the slang in Mexico is sometimes different from South America. When I travel to South America, they tell me that I have a Mexican accent. Laugh out loud. Sandy Degg, laugh out loud. Ghost Star says, I have a public-private partnership deal for him. Keep your pubics private. Hashtag privatize it. Sandy says, Joe, you are always a gentleman and a professional. Thank you, Sandy. Steve says, Doc, you're like the only one Tim Black did not mention in his hateful, sad rants. Congratulations. I'm not big enough to be mentioned by Tim Black. Unfortunately. And the day I get mentioned by Tim Black, I will congratulate myself. Whether he rants about me or whether he says good things about me. Either way. Kay says, PDA, the Progressive Democrats of America, I assumed, has a Sunday medical emergency town hall on YouTube. They're out of California, but other places too. Check it out. Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, Kay. Ghostot says, new COVID approach. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' new state treatment plan to fight COVID-19 announced the state will start dispensing monoclonal antibodies and Regeneron but through mobile clinics. Okay. Well, I guess we can see how that works. Ghostart says, hashtag jibber jabber, hashtag argy bargy. Lana says, not Famil 8 with Regeneron. Is he also offering vaccines? And Carmen says, Ghost Start, does it Sayer, hashtag Death Santis is getting the mononuclear treatment. I'm sorry, the mononuclear, and the monoclonal treatments from. Okay, says, I always share the PDA on my page on Sunday. Carmen says, sorry, keyboard is tripping. Does it say where Death Santis is getting said treatments from? Well, one thing, he's not getting them from Cuba. Steve Wolfbrand says, Evelina, I really need a vacation. Thinking Argentina and Peru. I want to fly over those weird, huge drawings in Peru desert. Perhaps we could have a drink together. I'll DM you. Yeah, that would probably be fun. It would probably be fun to go to a great steak place there in Argentina. And Evelina says, virtually impossible to be hateful around Dr. Joe. Well, Ghostot says, thank you, Evelina. Regeneron is the treatment former Trump received. Yeah, I know. Worked for him. Sandy says, Joe teaches people he doesn't get nasty, except maybe when it comes to Larry Elder and people like that. Carmen says, I prefer federal medical services instead of state-based, but that's because I live in a fascist state. Well, I prefer federal too. We'd all prefer federal. Keep in mind that the second strategy, the fight on all fronts strategy, is to fight for NEMA in a direct way and also fight for state-based single payer at the same time, just in case the fight for NEMA doesn't work. And since NEMA is now blocked by Biden, Schumer, Pelosi, the conservative Dems, and the Republicans, there's a real good chance the fight for NEMA is going to fail over the next 8 years. So maybe we need to consider the state-based single-payer strategy seriously, because the examples of those single-payer states can change politics and give an advantage to the party running at the national level on single-payer Medicare for all. In other words, look at state-based single-payer as a tool for getting to Medicare for all, as a tool that the group that shall not be named here says, don't use that tool because it's a distraction. Don't use that tool. It's in the toolbox. Take it out of the toolbox because it's going to be a distraction for you. Now, this same group, this very same, not to be named group, devotes most of its activity to its educational activities. While, of course, making the claim, I haven't heard them actually making this claim, but of course, assuming the claim that their main activism efforts will not distract from their efforts to push NEMA. Now, I don't mean to call either of these two endeavors, getting state-based single-payer plans or getting the perspective of MMT over the top, I don't mean to call either of those things distractions. They are essential. But I really think it takes a lot of gall to claim that going after a state-based strategy to get to Medicare for all, that is a distraction when that's advocated by a group of people who have no special expertise in politics that I'm aware of. Many of them have been studying a lot of macroeconomics lately, and that's great, and it's also very important. But where are their credentials? Where is their proof that they have any special expertise in politics? Now, I'll grant some of the members of this group that shall not be named are pretty smart, but they're not noticeably smarter than anybody else about the politics of the situations that they look at. Okay. And ultimately, the success of these state-based single-payer plans is going to be as much a matter of politics as it is a matter of macroeconomics. And by the way, they're not great at microeconomics either. Their expertise if they have any, is specialized in the area of macro. And I don't think I'm being nasty when I say that. Bonnie Firestone says, I know. And Steve Wolfbrand says, places like New Zealand have Medicare for all without a huge population. You don't really need a huge population. Yes, as I've pointed out a couple of times here before, the nation of Malta, that is the nation that used to be ruled by the Knights of Malta, has only 449,000 people in it. And they have a national health service, and they don't even have a sovereign currency. They use the British pound. So you don't need a huge population to have Medicare for all. There is no American state that has such a small population that they could not do Medicare for all. But I believe Stacy pointed out yesterday, made an important point, that it's not about the size of the population. It's rather about the density of the population, because you can't reach the whole population for Medicare for all when it becomes increasingly expensive to reach the whole population with the facilities that you need. And I think that is a very good point. So maybe, just maybe, you'd have to have it financed by an entity that can take losses continuously for the sake of providing healthcare as a human right to all its people. And that entity, of course, is the currency issuer, the government of the United States. Kay says, Ohio has the SPAN network, single payer for all network. I'm involved in that here. Well, maybe the SPAN network will be successful in pressuring for Ohio to join the North Central aggregation of states, their single payer plan, which could well be in our future. And Steve Wolfbrand says, Bonnie, Tim hit Kit Cabello hard. No, I'm done with Tim. I was his biggest fan for many years. I'm done with him now. Well, okay, I've never been that big a Tim fan. I'm not going to say that I'm done with him. If he has an interesting live stream, I'll watch it. I certainly did not agree with that rant at all, though. I have to say, I did not agree with that rant, okay, at all. I think it had very little, what he was talking about had very little effect on the outcome of the campaign. I don't think that is why Nina lost. I think the primary reason why she lost, and I'm not even going to speculate, I wasn't on the ground in the campaign there, but if I had to guess, I would say it was employing Jeff Weaver as the campaign manager. That guy's a loser. Sorry. Evelina says, Peru and Bolivia have the most wonderful indigenous cultures. In Buenos Aires, they're much more European. In the northern conferences, especially, I guess it's Jujuy, which borders with Bolivia, there is a rich culture. And in the Patagonia, the Mapuches, can't pronounce it. Steve says, Doc, to be honest, I think single payer could even work for a small rural town, a commune concept. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I'm not certain, okay, of the design. I guess the first thing the small rural town would have to get would be a doctor and nurses. Steve says, yeah, Evelina, okay, I want to do an AU Husha retreat with them as well. That's in Peru, isn't it? Steve Wolfbrand says, I know Buenos Aires is very European, but that is beautiful as well. Kostat says Matt Gaetz should turn himself into the FBI today. Evelina says Steve Wolfbrandt, Ayacucho. He says there's been a jumping off point though. Take an MRI machine, large expenditure, but could be utilized nonstop after hitting a certain population point. Same with physical plants. Too many hospitals are closing and need to be reopened. We're shaved to the bone on beds available, brought to light with the pandemic. Yeah, I know, and suffering right now in Texas from this greatly. Evelina says in Bolivia, Steve Wolfbrand says Evelina Pont, spelling problem, psychedelic bark drink, given by indigenous shamans. Evelina says that is no excuse. This is a rich country, Stace. Steve asks, are you in? Stacy says, it is an excuse. You need trained MRA techs and a place to house the machine and people to maintain that place, etc., etc. It's about costing, which is something most economists have no experience with. Well, the microeconomists might have some experience with it. Russ says, I was listening to Ryan Grimm, I think it was Grimm today, talking about the shortage of healthcare medical providers that we face. He highlighted the fact that post-secondary education is too costly for people to pursue. Good point to consider in promoting free college education. Yeah, I think Ryan Grimm was talking about that today. I believe I heard that segment. Stacy Van Veen says that Russell was supposed to be part of the ACA to provide specifically for education of nurses and doctors and techs. It was supposed to be part of it. I suppose it's provided some, but probably not what we needed. And Steve says, Russell Gorman, he's an ass. Ryan Grimm is not our friend. Steve, this is not always about who's our friend and who's not. It's also about the quality of the news analysis they do. Sometimes the quality of Ryan Grimm's analysis is very high. It does not matter whether you agree with him or you don't agree with him. The analysis is good and is worth listening to and critiquing if you don't agree with him. I mean, Ryan Grimm is one of the sharpest dudes out there. And by the way, he may cave. He may do things to keep his job and keep bringing in the big money because he works for The Intercept where they have the big money and he wants to live comfortably in D.C. with his family. I'm sure all of those are factors in what he says, but sometimes he hits areas where he can say what he wants because he won't defend his bosses. And some of those areas can be very significant for us. For example, in a spot there today, he and Kim Iverson, and this new lady they have on, I forget her name. She's a winger, but she's not as obnoxious, as most of the wingers, which tends to be a characteristic of the wingers that go on to rising. They tend to bring in those who are not so obnoxious. But anyway, all three of them lined up behind Assange. And Ryan Grimm made the point. He made the very, very obvious point. If the United States could go into the UK extradite Julian Assange because he broke one of our laws,
They said he did.
then some foreign dictator can move to extradite Ryan Grimm from the United States for breaking one of their laws. And he's basically saying, no way is that legal. No way. That can't happen. That's me. So Ryan Grimm did not miss the obvious point that what they're doing to Julian Assange at this point affects his freedom as a journalist. His freedom as maybe a future publisher. All three of them felt that way. None of them felt that we should be able to extradite Julian Assange from the UK. Ghostat says, at Carmen Muniz, does it say where DeSantis is getting said treatments from? Stacey Van Veen says, my daughter is a certified pharmacist tech and a nurse's aide, has 2 jobs, and doesn't make $15 per hour. But Stacey, where's she working? Where is she working that she can't get more than $15 an hour? What state is she in? Is she in Maryland? Is there a place in Maryland that doesn't pay certified pharmacist techs and nurses' aides $15 an hour? Steve says, a lot of comments, Joe. Steve says, holy fuck. Are you serious? Am I serious about what, Steve? Steve Wolfbrand, careful with is not the same as your cosmos, different ancestors, you know. Stacy says she performs EKGs, fills scripts, handles patients, etc., and is for the most part treated as disposable. She works for the leading cardiologist's office in the country. Who is the leading cardiologist in the country, Stacy? In what state is this, Stacy? Kay says, austerity does kill. Steve says, Steve Wolfbrand, in the spring, too cold right now. Oh, in the spring, in the Argentinian spring. That's the fall here. Kay says, how cold is it there, Evelina? Well, it depends on where you go. Well, actually, Peru is probably very cold because it's very high. Sorry, I scrolled down and lost my thread. I have to get back to it. I think I'm getting close now. Kay says, how cold is it there, Evelina? Evelina says, Steve Wolfbrand, miracle system hasn't broken down already. Probably not due to the great people in it. Only reason. And Russ says, Body Economics was one of my first reads. I stumbled into MMT and neoliberals in 2016. It was a shocking read. It still is a shocking read even today. Steve Wolfbrand says, Kay, their seasons are opposite of ours. And Kay says, I know that, Steve, not stupid. And Evelina says, some days below 0 centigrade or Celsius. In other words, some days below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, folks. Carmen says, Talisman has taken over, Talisman, the Taliban, has taken over major cities in a very short time. Afghanistanis won't fight them. I know. Evelyn says, to be fair, a lot of people forget we're upside down over here, Kay. Co-Star says, hi ho, it's off the troll we go. We dig in our minds the whole day through to dig. It's what we like to do. It ain't no trick to get rich quick. Carmen Rena says, Taliban, rolling my eyes. Ghostart says, Ghostart, if you dig with a shovel or a stick, bring bait, can't wait. Hip hop, hooray, starring Schmuck Chew More. Okay. Steve says, I know you're not Kay, but I didn't know it gets that cold. That's insanely cold for South America. Kay says, that's probably true, but I have been self-educated, Evelina Pont. Evelyn says, Steve Wolfbrandt, not in the Southern Cone. It's like Alaska in Ushuaia, Argentina, where the glaciers are. Oh. Stacy says, ivermectin is worm medicine, also works on the crud, mycotic dermatitis. So fungal eradicator, anthelmintic. Oh, yummy. Well, it may be, but there are a lot of studies of it now, and it appears to be successful in a lot of the trials thus far. There's a lot of evidence for it right now. Stacy says Bitcoin right now, $44,456.61. Alana says Gina Stiles, Kay is Gina Marie. Thank you, Alana. I thought that might be the case, but wasn't sure. Alana says, no, earlier you were talking about people running for office, and one was a retired sex worker or something. Yeah, who was that again? Yeah, I mentioned her. She was thinking about running for governor of California. She had run once before in 2003, but she was thinking of running for California again in the recall for governor, but she decided against it. But I'm sorry, I forgot her name already. It went in one ear and out the other. Kay says Antarctica is warming up too. Yes, it is. And for your information, Esha K at esha.legal is hilariously idiosyncratically brilliant. So I understand. Max Kaiser, I made some great profits on weird gambles as well. Good for him. Yeah, I don't have any problem with him. I mean, I wish I was the guy who bought into Bitcoin at $3 a coin. I mean, I should have been, but I'm so skeptical about that sort of thing. And what it really came down to is, okay, I just didn't have the 3,000 or so that would have made a difference floating free to make that kind of investment. I mean, I've been a pretty poor guy for a long time. And I got to watch my money. I can't take flyers. Evelina says, yes, probably too much messing with that continent, too many military bases down there. Stanley Degg says, transgender lady yelled at me. Kay says, I agree, Evelina Pont, but climate change is everywhere. Yes, but did you know most of the contamination comes from the northern hemisphere, where I think 90% of the world's population lives? Yes, I did know that, Evelina. Carmen Lena says, but YouTube is 1,000,000 times better for this live stream connectivity. Yeah, I agree. Sadly, I think I could have won this governor's thing. Sadly, probably too late. You might have been able to win, Steve. Yeah, you could have been really aggressive. Come out with all kinds of great social programs. Kay says, yes, Evelina, I knew that too. I'll laugh out loud, Steve. In fact, if you ran for governor of California, probably my daughter Devora would vote for you. She was looking for somebody to get rid of Bobo. And Stacy says PDEA stands for Progressive Democrats of America. Lana hates the clock, says you weren't attacking Tim Black, laugh out loud. So he wouldn't have mentioned you. But they weren't attacking Tim Black either. Somehow he thought they were attacking Nina. That's why he started attacking them. Comment says, all publicity is gold publicity. Yeah, Joe. Well, not all, but, if I got attacked from Tim Black, I don't think it would have hurt my viewership. It might help it. If I got treated favorably by Tim Black, I don't think that would hurt my viewership. It might help. Either way, it might help it because more people might come over and take a look. Different people, but nevertheless more people. And Ghost Art, does that make Bolsonaro hashtag Bobo Brazzi? That's good. I like that. And Lana says, I am not a fan of Esha Legal, no matter how bright she is. Why not, Lana? Kay says, Stacy, Progressive Dems of America. And Stacy says, thank you. Probably thanks Kay. Evelina says, Steve says, Evelina, I would have been the only progressive Democrat in the race. Oh, there are no progressive Democrats in that race? There's supposed to be 6 Democrats. None of them are progressive? Lana says, okay, Trump treatment. Got it. Evelina says, Steve Wolfbrandt, right you are, must say. Stacy says, it's not a distraction. It's an appetizer, an enticement. And Lana says, that's a good way to put it, a tool in the toolbox. Yeah, it's a tool in the toolbox. It doesn't mean that the Red Berets are anti-Medicare for all, or that whole Washington is anti-Medicare for all. It's their best way of getting there. And you know what it has to commend it? Less people die if they get it, right? Less people die. Less people go broke. Less people get divorced. Less families break up. Fewer families break up, sorry. But PDA is headed up by a retired doctor. A retired doctor is for Medicare for all, right? Biden says, Tim ain't black. Biden would probably say that. But not me. I would never say that. And Carmen says, Rwanda has free health care. Steve says, okay, Evelina, are you American? Why do you care about our country? We should talk privately. I don't get you yet, but I do like you. Stacy says, I think the ACA already has carve-outs that do pay for medical coverage. It's in Montana, Stacy, and may include some of the reservations. I remember Baucus making sure they were included. The carve-out, okay, in Montana was for the minors in Montana. They got the free Medicare under Section 1881A of the Social Security Act. That section was placed in the Social Security Act in parallel with the passage of the ACA. That was one of the ACA carve-outs that Max Baucus got. I don't know if there were any carve-outs for indigenous peoples in Dakotas, in Wyoming, in Montana. There may have been. I just don't recall that. I do recall the big exception for the miners in Montana. What a big deal that was at the time. Sandy says, I agree, Jeff is a loser. And Kay says, yes, she is, Steve. I love her. Speaking of Evelina, I think. And Steve says, Nina lost because the DNC fucked her like they did Bernie. Yes, that is why she lost. But she had to expect they were going to try to do that. And so she should have gotten herself a campaign manager who was prepared to fight that off, to fight them off, to really savage them. I don't know exactly who that would have been. Somebody to design campaign strategy to utterly destroy her. But Carmen says, if my neighbor comes to me choking and I save him doing the Heimlich, how terrible if I would charge him. The medical services should be ashamed as well. Not a question of being ashamed. It's a question of who would fund them. And that should be the national government. Atlanta says South Korea is a national health program too. Yeah, they probably got American consulting. Probably brought over some people from the Brookings Institution who advised them based on our Medicare model, just like happened in Taiwan. Lana says, what did I miss? I like Ryan Grimm. Well, Steve said, that Ryan Grimm is not our friend. And I agree, Ryan Grimm, okay, is not our friend. But he's a damn good analyst and worth listening to and watching. And when it's in order, well, worth criticizing as well. Steve says, how can we extradite a non-citizen? We can extradite a non-citizen if his nation is just caving to the United States and is not willing to fight for him. Okay, and if a once proud empire has now become the tail of the dog. I'm surprised the British could hold their heads up high these days. Kay says, laugh out loud, freedom of the press is not at all what it used to be. Shake my head. Stacy says, yes, Maryland. She works in Maryland? Less than $15 an hour? She's not unusual in the pay department. It's all over. Probably in Northern Virginia, too. Whew. That is scandalous. Scandalous. Evelina says, I'm an expat. Stacy says, Frederick County, Maryland. Yeah, I kind of suspected that you were in Frederick County, Maryland. But I think you don't actually live in Frederick, right? Before we moved here to Ashburn, we had lived in Alexandria. We came close to moving to Frederick. Steve says, Stacy, she should get $25 an hour here, but it's expensive here. It's not more expensive than it is here, Steve. I think costs are about the same, but maybe rent is higher out there somewhat. I don't know. I'm in a subsidized building anyway. A federally subsidized building is probably the same kind of subsidies they have in Maryland for the type of building I'm in. I think the rents are a little, they were cheaper in Frederick than they are here in non-subsidized buildings. I think we were, at that time that we moved in here, we were probably $300 or $400 more expensive for a comparable apartment than in the city of Frederick in Maryland. Evelina says Spanish ancestry and U.S. Citizen. Steve Wolfbrand says Evelina Pont, we should probably talk privy. Kay says, love you, Evelina Pont. Garstart says mandatory monoclonal lizard people antibody injections for all. Hashtag MMLPAI for all. Gee. Steve says, K. Clark Ryan, me too. Lana says, the two Steve comedy sideshow laugh out loud. Carmen says, everything I read about ivermectin is still negative, probably smeared by big pharmaceutical industries. Okay, look up Dr. Bean on YouTube. His real name is Dr. Mobeen Syed. It's SYED. He comes from what is now Bangladesh and used to be East Pakistan, and he is extremely bright, extremely careful researcher who brings lots of very careful researchers onto his program. There's also John Campbell who talks about it again. Also, Dr. Pierre Corey, if you look him up. And what is it? What's it called? The FLCCC Alliance. Okay. They probably have a YouTube channel. Okay, and Pierre Corey is one of the main figures there. They've done a lot of work, okay, with ivermectin, okay, in many countries, and they are, okay, on top of the studies. There's a woman in England, Dr. Tess Laurie, who's done some very influential meta-analyses of many, many studies, okay, of ivermectin. And those studies are impressive. There's some impressive evidence in them. And to me, having listened to some of the findings and, seen some of the research, there are too many doctors involved. They're good scientists. They're good doctors. I think that I know one when I see one, because I had a lot of scientific training, okay, in my area, okay, of the social sciences. And I'm pretty strong, okay, in philosophy of science. I can recognize a good scientist when I see one and hear one. And those people are good. Dr. Mobeen Syed is also one member of the FLCCC Alliance. They all have shows. Those shows are often taken down by YouTube, but not always. A lot of YouTube videos still exist, okay, are still up there. And I think they are surviving, and I think really they're thriving in getting the message, okay, of ivermectin out. Its use as a prophylactic, okay, is also very important. The protocols are not really standardized yet. Each of the doctors has their own ideas, okay, of what works best, okay, and what doesn't. But of course, the drug is very, very inexpensive, Okay, it's fairly easy to get. It has almost no side effects. It's one of the safest drugs, okay, in existence for human consumption. And it just sounds like it would be sensible to use it as a prophylactic, at least, especially in the coming times where COVID is extremely catching, okay, with the Delta variant. Evidence is also emerging that for older people, the immunity from the vaccines is somewhere, okay, in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 months. Then it fades. They're going to have to be booster shots. I think those booster shots are probably are on the verge, okay, of being approved. Okay, at this time, I expect to be hearing from Kaiser actually within a month or two about a booster shot. But okay, I also think that even though the vaccines are effective, I expect the booster shot, okay, is going to be effective. But I still think that it's better not to get COVID at all. Not to be spreading it to others. So it may be that taking a prophylactic, okay, if one exists, if it continues to be the case that ivermectin, okay, is looking good, that's the sensible thing to do. Steve says, Doc, take some mushrooms. You'll lose any fear of death and be a better person. All I can do is suggest it. Okay, I know you won't do it. Well, but I eat a lot of mushrooms now, Doc. I know. I mean, Steve. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about psilocybin, I guess it's called. Essentially magic mushrooms. Yeah. Okay. I know that I can probably take it without any fear. Okay, or any harmful side effects or stuff like that. That has never been my interest. I mean, it might be. I don't want to lose my fear of death. I don't know. Maybe I like my fear of death. Maybe I'm a better person for it, Steve. Anyway, Steve Wolfbrand, I married in Argentina. I left the U.S. in 1999. I left. I left for Buenos Aires, where he's from, which I hear is a very wonderful city. Evelina. Steve says, Evelina Font, you got any available girlfriends? Laugh out loud. Ghost Art says, The Joe Show, rated V, violence. You're talking about this Joe Show? Sorry, I scrolled down too fast. Evelina says, Steve Wolfbrand, honestly, but you're better off with the Peruvian, okay, or a Bolivian gal. Argentine women are, shall I say, complicated. It's all that plastic surgery, right? Ghost Art says, so what you're saying is Steve's a tool? No, I never said that. Nope, I never did say that. Lana says, my experience with Esha is she's very full of herself. She was at the second and third MMT conferences, a cohort, okay, of Rowan, okay, and Raul Carrillo, but very bright, but in my opinion, obnoxious. And she became a squad AOC basher. And Lana says, Carmen, 2 or 3 doctors on YouTube have praised ivermectin. Check Dr. John Campbell and Mobeen. Mobeen Syed, Syed is his last name. His first name, is Mobeen. And he calls his members cool beans. Evelina says, must be that Italian blood, laugh out loud. And Kay says, Evelina Pont, I come from German, Gypsy, and Irish descent. Evelina says, Irish women are the best, German, mech, lots of German blood down here too. Well, Bonnie's father was German, so I can't really, I'm not going to say anything bad about German blood at all. Steve says, but luckily I have the money to make any move work. I really want to get out of here and love Spanish culture. I don't think Bolivian culture and Peruvian culture is exactly the same as Spanish culture. At least not down there in those countries. Lana Dell says that whole thing with Assange is hideous. I wish she could have escaped with Snowden. Why doesn't Australia fight for him? He's their resident. No, he's their citizen. His partner and his children are Australians, and he's an Australian, and he never gave up his citizenship. They're letting the United States persecute a journalist and publisher from Australia.
For over 10 years now, isn't it?
Yes, that's what Australia is allowing. There was a campaign in Australia to try to get Julian to stand for the parliament. Because if he won, he couldn't be held any longer and would be free to go home. Kay says German gypsies were the first ones, the Nazis went after. Called the Romas now. But the Romas were throughout Eastern Europe, and in Spain as well, not only in Germany, and probably, I suppose, in Italy too. They were dispersed actually throughout much of Europe. And they gave their name to Romania. Steve Wolfbrand says, I can relate. Russ Goldman says, got to call it a night. See you again soon. Good night, Russ. Thank you for coming. And Stacy says, I live less than a mile from Frederick City. I live in the county. I'm from Moco, Montgomery County originally, I suppose. Been here since '63. Now, we've been in Northern Virginia since 1975. That's when we came down here. Yeah, we almost moved into, I think it was Frederick City. I'm not sure whether it was Frederick City. All I know is it was Frederick. We found an apartment, in Frederick. We actually put down a deposit on it, which we lost when we found this place. Actually, this place has a number of advantages. It's designed for people who are over 65, and also it has elevators, important, and also it's subsidized, and also It's only 10 minutes away from our grandchildren. So Evelina says, I met some roamers passing through and in the Sierras in Cordoba. They were Italian, though. Ah, yeah. Ghost Art says, but Lanadell hates the clock. OIC. What's OIC? Evelina says, the province of Cordoba, okay, in Argentina. And Ghost Art says, who's going to be Trump's re-inauguration tomorrow? Yeah, he said he was going to be he was going to be inaugurated or re-inaugurated by August 13th, I guess. I guess it ain't going to happen. And my grandma was from Austria-Hungary, she called it. And that's funny, so was mine. She was from the Carpathian Ukraine, which was in the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time. Carmen says, oh, I believe ivermectin is a good thing. I'd damn sure rather take that in place of the stuff the fascists are pushing. And Lana says, yes, I can't wait to attend Trump's inauguration, laugh out loud, and get COVID from the rest of the fruitcakes. Stacy says if ivermectin works, you can get it from southern states for bovine use in aqueous solution, or get a tube of paste for horses. I used to reduce it for use in dogs. Ah, I see. You may be able to get it from, I don't know, from lots of places here now, because there are a lot of people, I think there are a good many doctors who are experimenting with it in their practices. I know some of the people in the FLCCC Alliance are using ivermectin for their patients. And cases, my grandma was not allowed to say she was a gypsy even when she moved to this country. She told me many stories about it when she got too old to remember that, though. What story she told me? Steve says, I think South America would suit me better. I've been all over Spain and Portugal, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, Uruguay. I think you said Ecuador twice, didn't you? But what do you think? Okay, I love the beach. Stacy says, a very small amount of ivermectin works for its prescribed by usage. 1,000-pound horse gets an amount of paste which is mostly full of inert ingredients, and it is the size, of less than a lipstick. The treatments, of ivermectin that Dr. Bean is taking himself was something like, I think he mentioned 12 milligrams today or something like that. It was only a small amount. He takes it for a couple of days a month. But he says it's only effective, for about a month. So he has to take some every month. And he takes some when he's about to go on a trip also for prophylactic purposes. Evelina says, Austrian Empire. How cool. I don't know how cool it was when they lived in it. Ghostart says, but PSA, Assange's next court date, October 27th. Hopefully he will finally win on October 27th and he'll be able to go home. Okay, says, my grandpa died in the flu epidemic in 1918. Left her with 5 kids to raise. She got a job working on a railroad, one of the first women to be a worker on the railroad. About lantern and all. Laugh out loud. I love that woman. I can see why. I'm not going to repeat your tweet there, Ghostart, about the mandatory monoclonal lizard people, etc. And Carmen Yunus says Assange is also Ecuadorian. If I read that right, I don't know if that meant that he relinquished his Australian citizenship. No, I don't think it meant he relinquished his Australian citizenship. He was given citizenship by the Ecuadorians, but I believe it was somehow revoked by Lenin Moreno. I don't know if that was legal or not. I don't know if it would be sustained by the current government, but of course, the right-wingers still control Ecuador because during the latest election, the semi-fascist won there. Garstad says, I hope they realize if Julian Assange is extradited here, we're all showing up. I sure hope we all do. Steve Wolfbrand says, shit, I think I could have made this governor thing work. Are there only Democrats, any Democrats on the recall ballot? There are 6. I don't know whether there are any progressives on the recall ballot, except I assume the 2 Greens happen to be progressive. I got to find out who the Greens are. Ghostart said, Ecuador rescinded his citizenship. Yeah, that's what I think they did. I mean, I think that's kind of illegal. It's shameful, very shameful. But they had to do that, okay, in order to allow the UK people to come to the embassy and get him, right? Kay says she had parties at her home on Sundays and she could drink beer and shots with all her male co-workers, laugh out loud. She smoked cigars too, laugh out loud. And Lana says, I used to live in Frederick. Evelina says, Steve Wolfbrandt, Ecuador has nice beaches. Bolivia is land-bound because Chile stole the coast and the Atlantic coast in Argentina. Okay, in Uruguay, the water is very cold. The best bet is Brazil for amazing beaches, but Bolsonaro's there at the moment. And in Venezuela, how are the beaches in Venezuela? Carmen Mina says, do we have to keep going through drunk girls' entire history?
I wonder how all these things come.
Over and over again, frustrating. Oh, Carmen. Evelyn says, as you know. Stacy says, I have a friend who is Ecuadorian. It looks beautiful there. Evelyn says, right on the equator, perfect weather. Quito is the land of the eternal spring, they say. Evelyn says, see, Steve, both Stacy and I think Ecuador is right for you. I don't think it's right for you, though, Steve. I think the fascists control the place now. Of course, that might be temporary, but maybe not. Stacy says, Esculturas, Enrique Vascones. That's him. Steve Wolfran says, I picked fruit with Roma in France as a vagabond in France in the 70s. They were cool, great flamenco music. I played flamenco guitar back then. Their girls were beautiful. The locals despised them as thieves. Evelina says, cool, Stacy. Ha! In Jimmy Dore voice. Joe said, lizard people laugh out loud. Dude harpooned his 2 kids over LPQ-spiracy. WTF, hashtag Flintstones. Steve Wolbrand. Yeah, they have that reputation in Spain. I'm sure there is a racial component there, prejudice. Me too. Steve Wolfbrand said the Roma were very cool. Their grandmas could read your palms. The young girls just wanted to have fun. Evelina says gorgeous beach. Venezuela's gorgeous beaches too. Caribbean waters. Beaches, yes. I think they are beaches there too. Evelina says racial component, okay, to their prejudice, I meant. Yeah, I think that too. That is true all over Europe. Kay says my grandma was the best. She told me stories about living out of a mobile cart, horse-drawn. Steve says the Roma actually wear those wonderful colors. Okay, guys. That's it, I think. We're done. So everybody, good night. Thanks for coming. Thanks for staying. This was certainly a fun conversation.
Thanks for sharing.
And thanks for sharing. And I will be here again on Saturday nights. Steve says the Roma know your future. Sandy says, thank you, Joe and Bonnie, and everyone. Have a great night. Jim Bird says, night. Hey, Jim, I didn't even know you were here. Stacy says, night, night. And Dolores says, thank you. Good night, all. Ghost Art says, but PSA, hashtag prepare for war. Gaudium Sigatur. Lana says, good night. Steve says, good night, Doc, and all. And Kay says, thank you all for another great discussion, listening to stories about my grandma. Laugh out loud. But love you all. And we love you, Kay. And your grandma, too. So good night, everybody.